So in this video, we're going to talk about slope, and so let's jump right into it. So what does the slope of a line represent? So the idea of slope is talking about really the steepness of a line. And just to be very clear about this too, slope is represented by the letter M. And so when we're talking about steepness of the line, so like steepness, so like when you look at these lines, like you can tell like the different levels of steepness between them, right? So the slope kind of helps gives us a measure of this. Now, as a heads up, there are really like three types of slopes. So the first one is where you have a slope that's equal to 0. So we'll talk about what type of line has a slope of 0. And then the other one is the slope is undefined. And you only get something undefined when 0 is in the denominator. So we'll also talk about that situation. And then finally, which is far more common probably in most problems, is that you're going to have just a non-zero number for the slope. So that's the other situation that can happen. Now, one last thing I want to mention about slope before we get into some examples is that we think of slope as rise over run. So this is one way that you can help determine the slope of a line. So let's look at an example. Okay, so in this example, we want to find the slope. And the thing I want you to notice here, in this particular example, I've actually marked kind of 2 points. So we're going to use these 2 points to kind of help us get through this. Now, here's what you want to do. When you look at the 2 points, you always start on the left. So start on the left. So you want to count from the left and work your way right. So the thing that you want to notice here is that, we start at this point, we go down this way, and then we go over this way. So this is like the way that you want to think about the slope, because remember, it's this idea of rise over run. So the rise has to do with the horizontal change, and the run has to do opposite. The rise has to do with the vertical change, and then the run has to do with the horizontal change. Okay, so as I look at this, so notice like I'm actually just going to count out the number of tick marks I go down. So starting here, I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I went down 6, and then I turned and I went 1, 2, 3 to the right. So this is right 3. Okay. So now I want to talk about how do you actually interpret this. So the slope in this case, so first you put your rise. So if you go down, that's negative, and if you go up, that's positive. So since I went down, this is going to be -6 over 3. Now, if you start on the left, you're always going to end up making a right turn. So this can never be positive or negative. You're just always going to make a right turn. So it's good to like kind of go in like the same direction. Just it makes it counting this out easier. And so then after you get all that information, so this can be simplified. So the slope in this case would just equal -2. Okay, so just to review, down is negative, up is positive. You'll always make a right turn as long as you start on the left. Okay, so maybe you want to pause here and try this one and then hit play when you're ready. So notice once again, I've got my 2 points here. This one is the one that's most on the left. So if I want to count this out, so once again, just to kind of make my life a little easier, I'm going to just kind of mark this up. Now in this case, I'm going to go up first and then I'm going to turn right. So if I count this out, so let's see, I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I went up 8, so it's positive. And then I go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So also 8. And so that just simplifies to 1. And so then that would be our slope. So that's one way that you can determine slope, is by kind of counting out a picture like that. But another way that you can find slope, if you're just given 2 points and you don't have the graph in front of you, you can use the slope formula. So here it is. So for 2 points, so we'll label these x1, y1, and x2, y2. The slope between them is given by this formula. So this is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now it doesn't actually matter, by the way, which points you want to call your x1, y1 and your x2, y2. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So here are my 2 points. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the slope between them. So let's start by assuming this is my x1, y1, and that this is my x2, y2. So remember, my formula here is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I go ahead and I calculate all of this out, so okay, here's my y2, and then here's my y1, so it's 8 minus 5 on top. And then in the bottom, so x2 minus x1, so here's my x2 minus my x1. And if I sort all this math out, I get 3 over 1, which just equals 3. Okay, so remember that result because now I want to do something a little sneaky. So let me get rid of all of this for a moment. And now let's go for the plot twist. Dun dun dun. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this x2, y2, and I'm going to call this x1, y1. All right, so now I'm going to still follow this formula. So now here's my y2, so this is 5, and then here's my y1, so here's my 8. And then the bottom, x2, this is my x2, 3. This is a 3 minus 4. Okay, so if I do the math here, now I get negative 3 over negative 1, and that still simplifies to positive 3. So this is kind of the point I was trying to make. It really doesn't matter which point you call x1 and y1 and x2, y2. Whatever, you can label those coordinates in whatever order that you want, but just make sure that you don't cross like the 4 with the 3. Like you can't mix the coordinates together, but you can change which one comes first, if that makes sense. So this will always work. Okay, so let's continue on here. Why don't you pause the video here and give this one a try, and then hit play when you're ready to check the solution. Okay, so like I said, so it doesn't matter which one I want to call my x1, y1 and my x2, y2, so I'm just going to go in order here. And so just as a reminder, so here's my lovely formula. Okay, so I'm going to have 4 minus negative 2 over negative 2 minus 6. And so I've got that negative and that negative, so that'll just turn the whole thing into positive. So if I do the math here, this is going to be 6 over negative 8. So that will simplify then to negative 3 over 4. And so that would be the answer in this case. And if you flip-flop these, you would still get negative 3 over 4. All right. So to finish out this video, now what I want to do is I just want to compare this last example, which kind of relates to a point I was making earlier. So let's go ahead, we'll call this x1, y1, we'll call this x2, y2. So let's go ahead and just set up the slope for this first one. So I take y2 minus y1, so it's going to be 4 minus 2, and then x2 minus x1. Okay, so notice what I get. I get 2 over 0. All right, so hold that thought. Let's contrast this now to D. So with D, so we'll do the same thing. This will be my x1, y1. This will be my x2, y2. Okay, so I've got, let's see, 4 minus 4 over negative 1 minus 2, and this gives me 0 over negative 3. Okay, so I just wanted to compare these two cases here. So in this case, you can't have a 0 in the denominator, so you can't leave this as is. You have to actually explain what this is. This means undefined. So remember, that was one of the slope types I talked about at the beginning of this video. And then if you have a 0 in the numerator, that just makes the whole thing equal 0. So you have to actually explain what your result means. But now we have to go a little deeper with this, right? What does this actually mean? All right, so now what I want to do is I just want to graph both of these results just very quickly. So let's pretend this is 7 right here, and 2 and 4. So this graph is like totally not drawn to scale. But if I just graph this point and this point real quick. So here's 7, 2, and here's 7, 4. So this is actually going to give me a vertical line. So undefined means that you have a vertical line. And then 0, so let's just compare real quick with a really quick little drawing here. So let's pretend that this is 4 on the y-axis. Here's negative 1. here's 2. So here's -1, 4, and here's 2, 4. So this gives me a horizontal line. Okay, so the takeaway here, the slope of 0 indicates a horizontal line, and the slope of undefined indicates a vertical line. So that's kind of the last thing that you want to know about slope. And so otherwise, that covers what I've got in this video, guys. So any questions, you can always drop me a comment. Thanks for watching. I will catch you next time.